I have with me, first I must say, the honor and the pleasure to be sitting with Msgr Foy. Good afternoon, Msgr Foy.
Good afternoon, Roger.
First, I want you to know that I've been waiting patiently for this day where I could come and meet with you so we could sit without being rushed and shoved around and have a chat together. First, a lot of people don't know what a Msgr is, because in French, when we say Monseigneur, it also means for the bishop. Could you explain to the people what a Msgr is, if you will?
Well, first of all, it's only an honorary title, and it's given by the Holy Father to those who are perhaps have some special duties. And I think I was made a Msgr in 1957 when I was appointed the head of our provincial matrimonial tribunal.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes me humble to think that a man told me sometime that priests are ordained and bishops are consecrated, but Msgrs are created, which means making something out of nothing.
Ah, beautiful, beautiful. If I may ask you, how long have you been a priest?
I was ordained in 1939 on June the 3rd, the Archdiocese of Toronto. There are 34 of us ordained then, and there are 4 still living. Msgr Flynn out in British Columbia, Msgr O'Neill, who's now in a retirement home in Orillia, and the other one is Msgr Hubitz, who is from the Archdiocese of Winnipeg.
Yes, I've met him once.
And I understand that he wrote a history of the Polish Church in Manitoba. And
maybe you'd like to say a few words to him if you haven't seen him for a while. I'll make sure that he sees this.
Msgr Hubitz, greetings from your old classmate here in Toronto. I remember writing you on the occasion of our Golden Jubilee, and you wrote me a nice letter back regretting that you could not come to join your classmates for the Golden Jubilee. Well, as you know now, they're all departed except you and Msgr O'Neill and Msgr Flynn, who is out in British Columbia. So I hope that you are feeling better, and I wish you every blessing and greeting from the class of 1939. God bless you.
You've also made mention, without me asking, I was surprised, as a matter of fact, when you told me that you knew Father Pat Moran.
Yes, Father Pat Moran was a good friend of mine, and I had the privilege of living in the Canadian College in Rome about the time when he was writing his doctoral thesis in theology. This was at when the Canadian College had moved to Via Concordia in Rome, which was the old Czech college. And the original Canadian College was on Via Quattro Fontane, had to leave because there were so few Canadian priests studying in Rome, and they took over 2 floors in the Czech College under the leadership of Bishop Gagnon. He was the rector of the Canadian College at that time. He's now Cardinal Gagnon, and I believe that he's not well at present, living with his sister in Montreal. But at that time, he was a very fine rector of the Canadian College and doing great work at the Holy See. And he became the head of the Vatican Council for the Family under Pope John Paul II, when he was created the Cardinal. But at that time, Father Moran was working, and we had a visit also from a brother of his, Father Lionel Moran. And I discovered that there were 6 Morans. And
they're all priests.
One has since become a bishop. So my greetings now to Father Pat Moran. I know you're doing great work in Winnipeg.
Very beautiful work, as a matter of fact, not because we're talking about him, but I would say that he has the most successful parish in Winnipeg and Manitoba.
I know he's keeping the faith and was always true to the doctrine of the Church, and a great priest.
You've also known one of our bishops, Bishop Wall.
Oh, Archbishop Wall. Yes, indeed. I knew Archbishop Wall at the time that he was going into the seminary. I was a young priest stationed at St. Michael's Cathedral, and Cardinal William sent him to me to enlighten him on life in Laval, where he was going to take a seminary course and be back where he could perfect his French. He already knew French quite well. I believe one of his parents was French speaking. And he was sent down there to polish up his French, and so that he could come back and be perfectly bilingual. So I told him about conditions down at Laval, as they were in my time, and that perhaps helped him to accommodate himself to such totally new surroundings. So then he went on and became Chancellor of Toronto Archdiocese, and he was worked with me on the marriage tribunal for a while. And then he lived at St. Augustine Seminary, and then, of course, he was appointed auxiliary bishop here, and in charge of the financial situation in the Archdiocese, and then named to the great Archdiocese of Winnipeg.
Monsignor Ford, if I may ask you your age, there's a reason. Would you mind telling the people?
Well, some mornings I feel like 110, but actually I was born on August the 14th of 1915, in the middle of World War I, so I'm actually in my 85th year, and still, thank God, able to get out of bed in the morning.
There's one thing I noticed since we started the interview, and I must say you're the first priest that I see do this, that you always have the rosary in the hand. Tell us about this.
Well, this is a very special rosary. I was living in Rome for 2 years, including the year of the 3 popes in Rome. And my rosary having broken, I went over to the Piazza San Pietro, and I bought a new rosary, and I had this one blessed by Pope Paul VI. Well, as you know, I was living there also when he died in the summer of 1978. And I was privileged in being on the ceremonies for his funeral. And before the coffin was turned down, those priests on the ceremonies were allowed to pass by it, and I was able to touch this rosary to the hands of the Holy Father. Well, as we know, John Paul I was elected Pope shortly after, and this rosary was then blessed by John Paul I. And he died after about 33 days, and I was again on the ceremonies for his funeral, and privileged before the coffin was closed on his body to touch this rosary to the hand of John Paul I.
Wow.
And then I was in the square of St. Peter's when the white smoke went up for the election of John Paul II.
Wow.
And I had a little audio recorded there and recorded the ceremony and his first words as Pope, and the song of the bugles and the bells ring and so on, and the comments goes around me. And then shortly after, I was privileged in having this rosary blessed by John Paul II.
Oh,
so,
my goodness.
This is my, that was my year of the 3 popes, and also the year in which I had this rosary blessed by the 3 popes.
So your son went part of the history of the church.
And this is the rosary I hope to carry with me to to the grave. So this.
I know you'll have the arms of the Lord doing it himself. I know that for a fact. If I ask you a question, because I know it's hard today in the year 2000, what is it like to be a priest in the year 2000 for you, having lived all the changes going on? What is it like for you today?
Well, it's a completely different time, of course, and it was quite a shock, I would say, after saying the Trinity Mass for over 25 years, to be introduced to new liturgy and all the changes. It is much more complicated now, and because of the shortage of priests, it's much more difficult for the priests today, I would say. Because in those days, when I was ordained, even a parish of 400 souls or families would have perhaps 3 priests. And we were able to have much more contact with the families through visitation and through spending time each week in the school, teaching the children and so on. And give more time for the preparation of different sacraments. So it's very difficult today for the average priest, because now there might be only one or two priests in a parish where there are 2,000 or 3,000 families. And of course the change of liturgy, changes of every kind, make it very complicated. And then a certain, I would say, loss of faith in front of the people, perhaps through the use of bad catechetics in our schools, with the advent of the Pagan Catechism, and there's not the same faith among the people, or the same devotion to the sacraments of penance, and family life is so much different. The families are so much smaller. There's this widespread practice of contraception, which is one of the great tragedies, I think, in our Canadian church in the last 30 years, where the families think that it's permissible now to prevent children through contraception. It destroys not only the future of the country, but destroys the family life and the self-giving, which is so important for married life. So these are some of the things which we reflect on after all this time.
If I said to you what some people have told me, you know my views are very much in the tradition of the church. But some people say you can't have 4 kids in the year 2000 because you can't afford them. What would you say to these people?
I think that's completely false. It was more difficult, I think, perhaps, to raise a family, but I think that if they got back to the essentials, it would not be so difficult, because people today are more self-centered, I do believe, and therefore not willing to make the sacrifices. When I was brought up, I was one of 8 children. My mother never worked. My father had a fairly good position. But here was, we didn't have a summer home. Most of my life we didn't have a car. We didn't go away for trips, but we had sufficient. We never wanted. And I think that people were satisfied with less and not so addicted to material things and technology that they could have a much happier life and better family life as well. So those are my thoughts.
Another question I would like to ask you, because it's a question that is being raised sometimes silently in people's heart, about the Eucharist.
I would say that there seems to be a diminishing faith in the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist. I think it began, unfortunately, with the advent of the Dutch Catechism in Holland. Just after Vatican II, it was approved by Cardinal Alfrink in 1967 and appeared in translation of the world. That catechism was very weak on the presence of Christ in the Eucharist, and even said that we cannot say that, we should not say that Christ is present in the promise anyway. But they did not use the word transubstantiation. The doctrine of transfiguration came into prominence, and this helped or contributed to the weakening of the faith in the Eucharist. This is one of the key elements of restoration of the faith in the Church today, is respect for the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist and for the sacrifice of the Mass. That is why I endorse most strongly the practice which is growing now of perpetual adoration in the Blessed Sacrament.
Could you tell us what it is? A lot of people in Manitoba don't even know what that means.
Well, perpetual adoration means that Christ is present in the church, on the altar, in the monstrance, and people may come and visit him any hour of the day or night to adore him. This is being more and more widespread. In 1993, I believe, at the Eucharistic Congress in Seville in Spain, the Holy Father said it would be a marvelous thing if we had perpetual adoration in every parish and every community. So there are those who are promoting this now, and we have more and more churches in Toronto even, which they have perpetual adoration. I'd like to mention here a society which is established for this purpose, and is organized in this area, and under this particular organization, which is active here in Toronto, is under a missionary brother who comes to the parishes and offers to organize perpetual adoration in the parish. The parish priest has no responsibility or problem about it. It is done by a group of lay persons organized to spread this devotion. All the priest has to do is to change the sacred host once a month, provide the monstrance on the altar, and then the people organize to adore perpetually.
You mentioned something on the altar. I've seen here last time I was in Toronto.
Yeah.
I don't remember the name of the church where Carmel took me.
Oh, yeah.
Behind the church there was an addition that was made, and a little chapel for perpetual adoration, which is very unfamiliar because I've not seen this in Manitoba. So are you referring to having a separate place or within the church?
No. Some places that is an optional thing, where they have a special chapel for adoration, but this is usually done in the main body of the church, and it's where the monstrance is on the altar outside of Mass times, and where the people can come to adore. So it would be practically impossible for many churches to have a separate chapel. It would be too expensive, not practical in many cases. And so we have the option of either a special chapel or the nave of the church where this can take place.
How is it going into Toronto or the area, Ontario?
It's growing. Thanks be to God through the efforts of this brother Michael, who's doing so much for it, going around promoting it. But many more priests are realizing the effect of the perpetual adoration on the lives of their parishioners. And so we have places like St. Rose of Lima near here where they have perpetual adoration. You can go at any time of the day or night and adore there. And many other places in Toronto now. We hope that this will keep on going until this is in every parish.
I want to ask you another question, Monsieur Foy, because you've been a priest for much longer than I've been living myself. In Manitoba, there's an older priest, Father Zwoboda, who wrote a beautiful little book on the sacrament of penance, the importance of penance. But he was told locally in, I must say in St. Boniface and Winnipeg, that we're in the year 2000, these are old things. What would you say to this?
This is another unfortunate...
And with all due respect to the church...
Right. Well, I would say this. When we lose a sense of sin, then we're spiritually lost. And there has been a great loss of this sense of sin today. The church, in her teaching, has never diminished the importance of the sacrament. And it is just as true today as it was then to say that the frequent reception of this penance is a great spiritual worth. Many of the saints went to confession every day. Some did, and all went frequently. Pope Pius XII, in his encyclical on the mystery of the body of Christ in the 1940s, mentioned 6 special blessings or graces which come, or benefits which come from frequent confession of devotion, which means going to confession when there's been no serious sin. He mentioned, for example, the personal advice given by the priest, the sacramental grace, which is the grace to reject sin in the future, the act of examination of conscience, which is beneficial for the person to make spiritual growth, and the specialized advice given to each person, and also even the penance, which they say after the sacrament is a greater benefit because it's attached to the sacrament than your personal act of contrition or penance. So all these are benefits of a frequent reception of penance. It would be a tremendous boon to the vitality of the Church in Canada if people would go more frequently to the sacrament confession, which of course is necessary if there has been serious sin before they can receive Holy Communion. Unfortunately, in some places they have had illicitly general absolution without being told that it is their obligation to go to individual confession as soon as possible after receiving general absolution, as soon as conveniently possible. This is the law of the Church. If they do not have that intention of going individually to confession afterwards, then the absolution was invalid or null. So the Pope is encouraging the restoration of sacrament penance and on a frequent way. Recently, the Bishop of Australia were told that they must eliminate general absolution.
I'm glad that you bring this up. I want to ask you another question. We'll pause for a second, and we'll be right back. Okay, because I want to tell you this. Back with Monsignor Ford. Before the break, Monsignor Ford, you were speaking of general absolution. I know that I've assisted at some Mass where I've seen the priest saying, I will now give you general absolution, but never no mention that they have to go to personal and confession. A lot of people are not aware of this, that take it that the general absolution is it's finished and it's over with and carry on. Would you like to elaborate on this a bit?
Yes, well, it's a teaching of the Church that the only ordinary way in which we can have our mortal sins forgiven is through the sacrament of penance. And there was a declaration of the Council of Trent on this, which says that if anyone shall say that it is not the will of Christ that all mortal sins must be confessed in their number and time, then let them be anathema. So we do have an obligation of confessing every serious sin in its number and kind. Now this is not dispensed with by general absolution. When it is the bishop who decides whether the circumstances can be present for general absolution, the people are obliged to be informed that in these circumstances they must go as soon as possible. The canonical word is quam primum. That means as soon as conveniently possible afterwards to individual confession. And if there is not the intention of doing that, then those sins are not forgiven. This is required for litany. So unfortunately, some people are the impression that they need not confess those sins afterwards. And this has led to a great, I would say, tragedy, really, in the lives of these people. Moreover, one person may not receive general absolution twice in a row before going to individual confession.
Which makes a lot of sense.
And because they have this obligation of first going to individual confession afterwards. So, how can you justify that in the ordinary circumstances today? There is not this real necessity for it. The Holy Father made that abundantly clear.
I've noticed you have a lot of things you wanted to share with the people on perpetual adoration, and people want to find out about this.
Yes, I perhaps was not as specific as I should have been in talking about this before, but I do want to give special mention to the missionaries of the Blessed Sacrament who are promoting perpetual adoration.
Okay.
And they have a little kit which explains the whole process by which this can be organized, and telling how perpetual adoration can be set up so easily in a parish with the permission of the parish priest, but with a committee of lay persons who can accomplish this. Now, if anyone is interested in this, and I hope all are interested in it, they may call Brother Michael of the Missionaries of the Blessed Sacrament.
Perhaps we could put his address and phone number on this
Well, his phone number is 905-515-1648. So this would be the way to contact Brother Michael. He is traveling around, devoting himself completely to setting up perpetual adoration.
So we could repeat the number in case some didn't hear it. 905, it's Brother Michael, area code 905-515-1648.
Very good.
Okay. Monsignor Ford, what's it like to be your kind of priest in the midst of the different kind? Because of the younger one, the younger generation.
Well, I must say, I am very edified by many of the young priests today. There was a period there when the teaching of seminary was not so solid, and the moral theology especially was not too orthodox. But I am very edified by the numbers of young priests coming out saying the Church Times of Toronto. Men like Father Testa, Father Academy, and others, Father Reddy, excellent young men who are doing marvelous work. So, and another encouraging thing is that the numbers of vocations are now increasing.
Beautiful.
And this year, at St. Augustine's Seminary, I believe they have 45 seminarians in theology, which is the largest number in about 25 years.
Beautiful.
So we're having a revival, as it were, and we hope this continues because the need is desperate. When I was ordained, there were 17 priests in our class for Toronto Archdiocese. Now, halfway through our seminary course, Cardinal Wiggman thought there were too many for Toronto. And so we were told about 1935 that unless some of us volunteered for other dioceses, some of us would be asked to leave. So we got together and we went in one by one, knocked on this door, and we volunteered to go wherever we were sent. The result was that 4 of our class were sent to permanently to other dioceses. 2 were sent to out west, 2 were sent to Kingston here in Ontario. And then 3 or 4 others were loaned out for periods of 3 or 4 years. So we had a superabundance of vocation in those days. The seminary was filled. There were over 190 seminarians in St. Augustine's Seminary. And now, of course, shortly during the crisis of vocations, the seminary is practically empty. So now we see revival. We hope that continues.
Beautiful. I wanted to ask you also, when we're talking about vocation, I was always under the impression that when you join the priesthood, they send you where they want you to go, and you have no say in it, but in the way you're saying it...
well, actually, we are ordained for the service of a diocese, or religious order, for the religious order name, but secular priests are ordained for the service of a particular diocese. But in our case, we had to sign a special form under Cardinal Msgr which said, or any other place where he might wish to send us. So it was a little bit different then, but you are ordained for the service of the diocese. But within that diocese, the bishop may assign the place wherever he wishes. I learned of my first assignment to the deanery of St. Catherine's in 1939 by reading it in the newspaper. That was the way we were told in those days, that it was printed in the paper before we got our official notification.
Mm-hmm.
So I had it over there in St. Catherine's in Niagara Peninsula, which is now a diocese of its own. It broke away about 35 years ago.
So would you say that anyone that went into missions is because it was their desire?
Well, they were missionary orders, you see. Mm-hmm. For example, we studied with the Scarborough Foreign Mission Society seminarians, and they joined with the intention of being sent to China or, in those days, or some other mission country. As a matter of fact, the day I woke up to go to seminary, I was undecided whether to go to start the China missions or to go to St. Augustine for the service of Toronto Archdiocese. But there are specifically missionary orders, like Marine Fathers and Msgr and so on. So,
here's the tough one that I've been holding back till now. I've heard Monsignor Floyd like a red flag in front of the bishop. What would you say to this?
well, I hope not. I have a number of bishops who I consider personal friends. In this way, I am very much opposed to the statement of the Canadian bishops on the encyclical Humanae Vitae, which was given at Winnipeg in September of 1968, because it proposed a false teaching on conscience. It said in Article 26, paragraph 26 of the statement, that there are circumstances in which the faithful may be assured that they may use those means of contraception which seem right to them. Now, this is a subjective norm, and it is not a proper teaching on use of conscience. Now, unfortunately, that paragraph 26 found itself in many marriage preparation courses and was quoted by priests in the confessional to absolve persons who were still practicing contraception and had no purpose of amendment. This is a great tragedy, because the teaching of the Church about contraception is a moral absolute. There are no circumstances which allow a person to use an artificial contraception without sin, objective sin. It's also led to widespread sacrilege, because many persons, having been given bad advice, either in marriage preparation courses or by an individual priest, believe it is permissible to contracept and then go to Holy Communion, whereas this is really intrusive sacrilege.
If I ask you, would you say that this statement on Humanae Vitae, on this issue of contraception, has much to do with all these, so people understand what we're talking about, the tying of the tubes and what, would you say that it opened the door to that?
Yes, this opened the door to
Sterilization
and opened the door to the abortions which come through the use of annulant pills and intrauterine devices, which are the cause of abortion. So, although the Holy See in 1975 absolutely forbade any Catholic hospital to practice sterilization, nevertheless, invoking the Winnipeg Statement, ethical boards in many Catholic hospitals allowed direct sterilization or by tubal ligation in our Catholic hospitals. I have often made representations on this point to bishops and the hospitals, but it is still going on, unfortunately. And in Quebec, I believe, about 1/3 of women of childbearing age have been sterilized. This is a great tragedy.
I have in my hands, I haven't seen it yet, but I could see through. It looks like a baby to me very clearly.
Yeah.
Human Life International, 1999. International Human Life Award, Reverend Monsignor Vincent Foy. Could you tell us about this one, Monsignor Foy?
Well, there was a Human Life International conference here in
If you
Toronto.
could close up on this, I would really love Monsignor to hold it so that we could show it at the camera.
It's the child, baby in the moon here shown, and with all its human characteristics plainly visible. It shows, it's an illustration of the fact that we do have a true human life in the womb, so precious to God, with the mortal soul. And to abort such a child, of course, is, as the Holy Father says, an unspeakable crime. And yet, this goes on so frequently, even in Catholic hospitals, through the prescription of the pill and through the intrauterine devices which cause an abortion. So this is one of the great tragedies of the day.
I would like to add also to this, if you allow me to hold this once before you. Ever since the Lord came to me, that the mission of the shroud began, 99% of the women that have come forward all went through abortion. Could not live with themselves after. Some of them had no religious background. In other words, they had no knowledge of any church. So it's not that the conscience, even though they felt their conscience was free, but they could not bear living with the thought that a child died because of action, regardless of what brought the action about. It's not just because of the faith, religion, or what, because I'd say 80% of those 99% of women did not have any faith of any kind. They weren't brought up into any faith, but the same feeling overtook them of regret. And for the benefit of those women, and the Lord has granted me to extend His power of forgiving, but also the gravity of the action. What would you say to these women?
Well, after the fact, of course, we cannot do what has been done. And they will suffer all their lives in the sense that they have killed their own child. So that in itself is a punishment which is really...
I wouldn't want to live with.
Yeah. At the same time, what is important is that they repent of what they have done, know that God forgives all sins, and when there is this repentance, He died, He shed His blood for that forgiveness, and it is available to them, and therefore they should have that consolation of knowing that they can be restored to God's grace and enjoy everlasting happiness with God in heaven. So this is the marvelous gift we have of God, the gift of His redemption of us. At the same time, it is to be hoped that they would do their best to make reparation by upholding the teaching of God in His church against abortion, by encouraging others that ever had that opportunity of never having an abortion, and by doing their best to support those who are in an unfortunate position like themselves of having had it and are truly repentant. So it is not a hopeless situation in the sense that God always forgives, but every effort should be made to make reparation of what they have done. And so it's not a question of going into despair over this.
That's what we guide them to, because of what they've lived through themselves.
Right.
And this is not justifying what happened either.
Right.
Because of what they've lived through, they could help prevent others.
That's right.
You know, and sometime one life could save 10, which otherwise wouldn't have. Again, not justifying what has happened, but if you suffer a doubt through abortion, you know the suffering and you know all the gravity of abortion. So if you could help others understand what you're going through yourself.
There's a Dr. Nathanson, who you may have heard of him, and who was a Jewish doctor who performed thousands of abortions. And he came to realize what a serious crime this was really against human life. He was converted from that, and became a Catholic, and now he is spending his life in promoting this recreation. that sense, good is coming out of Vila. And God's always been good out of Vila.
Monsignor Four, I want to thank you for this. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. We're back with Monsignor Four. There was something else you were going to mention.
Oh yes, you asked me about how the history of this beautiful cube or crystal containing the image of a child in the womb. This was given to me at the International Conference on Human Life that took place here in Toronto last year, presided over by Father Marx, who's a big pro-life worker. And they were kind enough to give the annual award to me for the pro-life work that I was privileged to take part in. So it was a great convention, many great speakers there, and many fine tapes available again at that Human Life International Conference. So that's the story of this presentation.
On this issue, there's something I would like to bring up because we will soon present you with this as soon as we're finished with the work that the Lord has asked me to do. We could prove, like all the research in the Shroud of Turin, which was, I was guided by our Lord and still am into the findings, in human blood, everything that the eyes have seen is imprinted into the blood of human. The whole history of the Shroud of Turin, the whole history of mankind is in it, and living colored photos that we could draw out. But we are at the point now where we are marching on this, guided by the Lord. The Bishop Denlec is aware of it. I spoke to him about it. We could prove that as soon as we get this finished, I'll make sure you get the first copy of this. We could prove that a fetus, regardless of its age, 2 weeks, 1 week, as long as there is a substance, I'll call it this way, because you understand that there's not formation. If we were to open that substance, to go to the center of it so that we don't touch the outer, we could prove in that substance that if it was an abortion, and even if it wasn't, but let's say if we were able to get into there, that whatever the eyes of the mother has seen, it is imprinted into that substance. In other words, if the woman sees a doctor, the abortionist, come forth, we could find the picture of the abortionist into that substance, even if there's no hands, no feet, no head yet. So we could prove that this substance, we call it this because it's so young as we speak, this substance is formed to the character of the mother already in its origin as it begins. And therefore we will be able to prove that an abortion is not only just a murder and atrocious, but when we will be able to prove that that the mother sees all the thoughts and everything is imprinted into the substance that we call it, because many don't want to accept that it's a life because it's so young, but we will prove beyond any doubt that it is definitely murder and that there is suffering to that. How did you get involved with this issue?
Well, I suppose that you could say my involvement was with the marriage tribunal. I was worked for over 25 years in our Catholic marriage tribunal, first in the Archdiocesan Tribunal, and then I became the head of our provincial matrimonial tribunal. And when you see the great tragedy of marriages which are ruined over the intention not to have children, and the abuse of marriages, and all these tragedies, that was a factor in my interest. And then I became especially interested in 1966 when a dissident theologian called Father Gregory Bond was teaching publicly that Catholics could contracept. And there was a headline in a Globe and Mail in Toronto, 1966, Catholics may contracept now, or may use contraception now, by Gregory Brown. And I began to request a rector of the cathedral at that time. I answered that article and was writing notes to the press about it, so on. I got more and more involved with this whole question of the teaching of the church against contraception. I received a letter of thanks from the apostolic delegate at that time. Archbishop Pignatelli became Cardinal Pignatelli, although I got some local opposition. But this is the great struggle today for the lives of our Catholic people to inform them of the evil of contraception.
If it was possible for you today to do something with the church, what would you do?
The first thing I would do is try to correct the sad state of catechetics in Canada, because our children for 30 years have been brought up on what is called the Canadian Catechism. First of all, it comes the Father series and the Born of the Spirit series, which is kind of creedless catechetics. It follows the Dutch Catechism, which follows the New Theology, which follows the false philosophy of Teilhard de Chardin. And so our young people are getting only a fraction of what they should in Catholic truth in their training in primary school and even in high school. So I would say what the Pope said to the bishops of America after the synod on the Americans of last year, that give us catechisms in keeping with the Catechism of the Catholic Church and with the General Catechism Rectory, which was given to the Universal Church with explicit directions on what they should be taught and how it should be done. So the first thing I would do would be to say we must reform catechesis. We must be on a catechism that is not creedless, that gives the fullness of the Church's teaching in the spiral method, giving it to them at the beginning, the essential truths of their faith, and gradually developing those as they get older. And then it would be an approved catechism, approved by the Holy See as required in the General Catechism Directory. And then, the second thing I would do would be to eliminate sex education from our schools, because the program Fully Alive was doing immeasurable harm to our children, introducing them in primary school to all the know-how about sex when they should be taught rather modesty and chastity and keeping of the sixth and ninth commandments of God. Today, especially when sexual sin is so prevalent, the children need to be taught the beauty of chastity and modesty, which is the protector of chastity, and without the know-how information they're given in primary school today. So out would go the Fully Alive program, out would go the Born of the Spirit program, in would come a solid Catholic catechism in keeping with the practice of Holy See and the General Catechism Rectory. And then, if it were in my power, I would have the bishops recall the Winnipeg Statement and reaffirm the teaching of Humanae Vitae, the encyclical on human life, and have that preached in every pulpit, observed in every confessional, and used in every marriage preparation course to prepare young people for marriage, in which there is total self-giving and oneness of sacrifice for the good of the family. And then we would have restoration, also, of course, preaching regularly from the pulpit, some catechetical instruction, and encouraging a more frequent confession, and greater respect for the Eucharist through perpetual adoration, where that's everywhere. This would be my program for saving the Church in Canada and enforcing every Catholic hospital to live by Catholic ethics.
If I ask you, do you think that this is possible in the year 2000? What would you say?
Not this year, but it's possible by people uniting and praying and making sacrifices and raising their voices to ask for what the church teaches, and to petition their bishops to follow the instructions of the saint and the advice of the Holy Father.
For those who are just getting in the conversation with us, watching this video, I am with Msgr Foy in Toronto. We are February the 17th, of the year 2000, I should say. Msgr Foy, if I leave the camera to you to say anything to the people, what would you tell them?
Well, persevere in faith. Do not realize, please, that your Catholic faith is the most precious gift you have from God. You receive this gift of God in baptism. We receive the infused virtues of faith, hope, and charity. Keep that faith. Pass it on to your children. Study it. Nurture it by prayer and by the Holy Sacrifice, the Mass, Holy Communion, by adoration, and by spiritual reading. Have in your home the signs of your faith. Have a crucifix on your wall. Have holy pictures on your wall. Show that you are a Catholic in your home. And try to do some spiritual reading. The lives of the saints, the great spiritual classics of St. Teresa of Avila, St. John the Cross, St. Francis de Sales, and so many others. And also, know your faith through studying the most recent documents of the Holy Father. If you have knowledge, goodwill, and faith, then we can restore the faith to Canada. God bless you.
What are your hopes in your living time?
Well, you see, I have a life expectancy of about 3 months, so...
Well, it's going to be beyond that, we know that.
But, so my hopes are that there would be a reversal of this terrible previous catechetics in our school, that there would be a reversal of the permissiveness in the areas of sexual ethics in the church, and the church's teaching must be stronger in this regard.
If somebody said to you, because I know for a fact, a lot of people say we're in the year 2000, we're not in the 1940, what would you say to them?
Well, the faith is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, forever. The faith of the church today is the faith of the apostles. And Christ gave us the church to preserve that faith and to keep on teaching it. Now, this does not mean that, as Cardinal says, we cannot have growth in our understanding, but if that growth in doctrine means that the doctrine is changing, then that is not true growth. That is a contradiction of the faith of the apostle. So what we need more is faith in what the church is teaching, and that's faith in the teaching of many theologians who have departed from the faith. So, as Cardinal Wright used to say, there are many theologies, but one faith. By that I mean there are many who propose different theories about theology, but the theology can be good or bad, it can be right or wrong, it can be misleading or true, and so we have to have a theology which is in the faith according to the faith. And today, unfortunately, people have been misled by many false theologies.
Msgr Foy, I want to thank you to be with us, but before I notice there's a video there, I see the Holy Sacrament on the back of it. Could you tell us what this is, where it says Living Presence?
Well, this tape is a very fine Eucharistic presentation concerning different miracles which have taken place in modern-day America, which show the truth of the true presence of the Eucharist. One is of a host in which the extraordinary minister was bleeding, and
in the tabernacle.
yes, and this was examined by specialists, and they found out it was true human blood, and it continued to bleed even after it was placed in a little reliquary or monstrance. And so this is the type of miracle which our our demonstration is, or have in every century, the two beds are placed in the Eucharist. So let us grow in our faith in the Eucharist and know that we can obtain special graces for our devotion to Christ in the Eucharist. That is the place to go for our public prayers, is to go to the Eucharist.
Another question about the Eucharist. I want to ask you the question that people would ask. I have so much respect for you, but people want to be satisfied. I go to communion to receive the Eucharist in the hand.
Paul VI stated that this practice of receiving at the tongue must be preserved. The ultimate method of receiving the hand had its origin in the doctrine of transignification of the Eucharist. It was an attempt in its origin to downplay the true presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And this was introduced in Holland at the same time as Dutch Catechism as a way of reducing our belief in the true presence. It spread around the world illicitly, because even after the Holy Father permitted it, when it was requested, and one of the conditions was that it must already have become so institutionalized that it could not be stopped. And 2/3 of bishops must vote for it. Now, I must say that many bishops petitioned the Holy See, or voted for it, knowing that those conditions were not precisely met. But it is allowed now under certain conditions to those requested, but it has also been the source of many grave sacrileges, of posts found on the floor, mutilated, children carrying it out. I once had a man come forward during a funeral mass, and without any warning, he held in his hand, and this is when before it was obligatory, I tried to place the host in his tongue. Instead, he grabbed the host and ran to the church. So we know it has been used even in what they call black masses. So there have been many abuses as a result. And it's disheartening to see so many people who receive it in such a casual way. I think there's much greater respect shown to the Eucharist that we receive on the tongue.
I want to make clear here that I do receive the Eucharist on the tongue myself, and I made the question available for the people who would ask this question, and I don't want it to be misconstrued as I get it in the hand. I do not accept it in the hand. It is on the tongue. Also on the issue of kneeling for the Eucharist. Many people, it has not happened to me so far that I would be refused the Eucharist when I was kneeling. It has not happened. So I can't make a statement that it was refused to me. Some people have said that they would not be given the Eucharist because they were kneeling. And it's not to put you on the spot either, but could you clarify? I know for a fact that we cannot love God too much, so...
Yeah, well, the Church's law at present is that we may receive communion standing or kneeling. And we are encouraged not to receive in a way that would cause any disruption. In other words, if it's, however, it would be a grave sin for the priest to refuse Holy Communion to a person because they are kneeling. They may refuse Holy Communion to a person who's a public sinner, or is not known not to be a fit person to receive Holy Communion. It would be a grave sin to refuse Holy Communion to a person only because they are kneeling. And kneeling is the ordinary stance for adoration.
A lady told me that she was told that she was disobeying, trying to twist everything around by kneeling. you were disrupting the Mass.
Well, the church does say that if it were disrupting the receive one God, it was preferable, but it does not order. There's still that essential right. And personally, I'd be happy to see a person named to receive Holy Communion. At the same time, as I say, the priest does not have the right to refuse Holy Communion vows without the first meeting, although unfortunately I've heard there are such instances.
Receiving the Eucharist, the Holy Communion, let us assume, again, I'm not referring to myself, let us assume that we got a general absolution because of whatever reason, but I feel that I didn't get the absolution really. A lot of people come to me, they say, you know, I went to confession for this and that, it's still here, it feels like it's not gone, and what would you say to them?
Well, that would be a scrupulous feeling, because if they confess their serious sins, insofar as they're able, they may not remember all the sins they committed, they may not be able to give the exact number, but they make an honest effort, even although they were to forget something, and have a purpose of amendment, because no confession, no sin is forgiven unless we have a purpose of amendment. But they have a purpose of amendment, and they do their best to confess their serious sins, then the absolution is valid. They are in God's grace. They should go to there singing in their hearts, full of joy and peace, and go to Holy Communion. Now, let's suppose a person, when they, the next morning, they say, I forgot to tell that sin, that's a serious sin. They are still in God's grace. They made a good confession. All they have is the obligation, the next time they go to confession, they don't have to confess the sins already confessed. They only have the obligation of saying, Father, last time I went to confession, I forgot to mention this particular sin, which I know is a serious one. But they don't have to go back over anything else. They should have that comfort knowing that they're in God's grace. All that God asks us to do is to confess and to be sorry. We are proud enough to sin, we should be humble enough to confess our sin.
It brings about a question that I'm sure a lot of people would ask. If, for instance, confession is only available once a week, but let's say today I have sinned, I have no access to confessional, I don't know if I'll be alive tomorrow, what do I do?
All right. We may put ourselves in God's grace by an act of perfect contrition with the intention, a perfect amendment, the intention of going to confession as soon as that's possible. Then you are in God's grace at the moment. So now, when I say an act of perfect contrition, I don't mean a perfect act of perfect contrition. An imperfect act of contrition is one in which we are only sorry because we're afraid of punishment.
That's beautiful.
An act of perfect contrition is when we also have the motive of offending an all-good God. That's a perfect act, even although it's imperfect. No one makes a perfect act of perfect contrition, but we all can make an act of contrition because we love God and we offended Him instead of being merely afraid of hell.
Another question that the Lord allowed them to come so we could answer people. If a priest does not truly believe in the presence of our Lord, flesh and blood, in the Eucharist, but he tells people this is the body of Christ, but he doesn't believe it himself, does this mean that the Eucharist is invalidated?
Now, if the priest has the intention of doing what the church intends, regardless of his own personal worth or faith, the Mass is valid. So as long as he does not place any obstacle to doing what the church intends, it is a valid Mass.
The
same pertains to Mass to the priest to say Mass in the state of serious sin. He is committing a sinful act in not repenting and receiving absolution. But that does not affect the validity of the Mass or the value of the Mass to those who are praying. It is Christ offering himself up through the administration of the priest.
Okay, so if somebody brings up the argument, then it's okay for the priest is Mass is still valid, but my communion is invalid because I'm in sin.
Yeah.
You know, how would you answer people this question?
Well, the intention of the priest is not important. If he deliberately intends not to consecrate, then there's no Mass, there's no penance. But if his faith is weak, or he only believes in transubstantiation that this is a symbol, but he intends to do what the Church intends,
Obedience.
then it is a valid Mass. But it still remains the responsibility of the person to receive in the state of grace. But they do receive the blessing of grace. Okay.
So would you say then it's if I go to Mass in a state of sin, I still went to Mass, and I still got to go to confession?
And you would, if you're in a state of sin, like a Catholic living in an invalid marriage, a sinful marriage, they still have the obligation of going to Mass. Or if they have public honor to God, but it would be a sacrilege if they received Holy Communion. But the obligation to attend Mass is still there. And if they don't go, that's an additional sin. So it's multiplication of sin.
Another point, because we're getting quite a few converts in Winnipeg that are really happy with what they're learning, and I know that with you we'll get it right, the way it is. The issue of women covering themselves, and also we'll let you handle the Eucharistic minister in the church as
well,
women.
as far as women covering their heads, that used to be allowed in the church. But they would have to, they should cover their heads, because that was the way it was when I was growing up. And girls going to church and from school, if they didn't have a hat, they put a handkerchief over their head.
Yeah, I remember that too, yeah.
And it goes back to apostolic times when it was the custom of women to have their heads covered, because the woman's hair is considered her crowning glory. And this is a little veil for covering the head. Now, there is no obligation now. The church no longer in the New Canonic or the Catholic Church, but it is a laudable custom and one of respect, and many countries still, where it is the custom, they should definitely do it. In other places still aren't, but there's no obligation.
I saw last week her mail was showing me. It's one of the Catholic, I don't know if it's the Register or what, but they're talking about a modern Virgin Mary. My God, I couldn't believe what I saw. Like, I think she had pants on and short hair, and it really broke my heart to see this.
Yeah.
What would you say to this?
Well, it's a really, really tragic to see these images of Mary, which are not devotional. The picture in a way which is unbecoming the Mother of God. She is the Mother of God. All nature is solitary, but almost the most perfect creature that has ever existed. Free from all state of original sin, conceived free, not born free, but conceived free with no sin. So she never had any stain or sin or imperfection about her, never committed venial sin, and our model of all the virtues. Anything that does not depict her as a model of holiness and goodness, then is reprehensible and sad. And some of the things are really
Eucharistic ministers.
They did not used to be necessary. When I was brought up, there used to be 2 or 3 priests in the parish. We had no real problem in giving Holy Communion to hundreds of people, Christmas, Easter, and so on. Now, these were introduced recently, and they are permissible when there is a true need. But it is not permissible for the priest not to give Holy Communion, so that a lay minister may give Holy Communion.
Unless he's sick that he can't walk.
Or he can't walk, or is disabled, or too shaky to give it. I was constantly mass down in Arizona once when I was asked to sit down so that a monk could give Holy Communion, which was entirely improper. Or it is improper to multiply ministers beyond what is necessary. So if it is necessary because of a large congregation for the priest to have lay ministers, it is permissible today, especially with the shortage of priests. But just because of the lay liturgical needs is not sufficient.
Okay, some people are specifics on the yes and no's. There's 500 people receiving communion. The priest has to take what portion of that before a Eucharistic miracle to cut in?
Eucharistic minister.
Minister, I'm sorry. No, never mind. Okay, if there's 500 people to receive